we ever wondered what kind of community Newtown was, if we ever doubted the deepness of our love for one another, those questions have been answered. All those wonderful little faces that you see on TV and in the newspaper, like Noah Posner, who was laid to rest this morning, they're a reminder that despite the terrible, awful things that happen, that inside the hearts of all of us is this unbelievable goodness.
Back then, he was Congressman Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He was leading the House in a moment of silence after a shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary killed 20 children and 6 adults. A full decade later, the senator is still pleading with his colleagues after another massacre at an elementary school. Remember when we said never again? Well, again happened. Again and again. Back with us, Senator Chris Murphy. Senator, you were elected to the Senate 1 month before the Sandy Hook shooting. You mentioned in our earlier segment what it was like for you yesterday when you saw the news on your phone. But take us back to December 14th, 2012. 26 people murdered, most of them children. What was that day like for you?
Yeah, it's a day where, I heard things and saw things that often I wish I hadn't seen and heard. I was on a train platform in Bridgeport, Connecticut with my 2 little kids getting ready to go down to see the sort of Christmas splendor of New York City. I was going to take the afternoon off, and I got a phone call that something had happened in my congressional district. And at first I thought maybe it was a workplace shooting, but then I quickly heard that kids were involved, and I changed my plans, and I made my way up to Sandy Hook to find out what had happened there. And my life changed that day. I met some of the parents that are now, very close friends of mine that day. I met and talked to many of them later, but all of a sudden, I had found my emotional center as a member of the United States Congress. I knew that now I needed to devote my life to honoring those kids' lives with action. And it's kind of unbelievable to me that 10 years later, I have not succeeded, but I don't know that I'm going to give up until I have.
Since that day, you have made your way onto the Senate floor, pleading with your colleagues, again, after Sandy Hook, after the Pulse nightclub shooting, again and again and again. We're looking at the videos right now. Walk us through what this journey has been like, the journey that took you to your knees yesterday. You couldn't have been, you had to have been devastated, but sadly, you couldn't have been surprised by the news.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by it. I mean, listen, I have to go back to the beginning. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't work on this issue prior to Sandy Hook. I mean, I was a member of Congress for 6 years. There was slaughter happening, every weekend in cities in Connecticut, and I didn't work on this issue in the way that I should because, this country pays attention to gun violence when it happens in these mass episodes, but it happens every single night in Baltimore and Hartford and New Orleans. And I definitely look back with regret on the fact that it took Sandy Hook to wake me up to this epidemic, and I think I am trying to make up for lost time. I go down to the Senate floor to talk about this in the wake of these shootings because I just really worry that there is something rotting in the American core that is making us numb to this slaughter. I think we are on the verge of just thinking that this is normal and losing our sense of outrage. And I want to make sure that people see my outrage. As someone who works on this every single day, I don't lose my outrage. And I want to communicate that to people so that they don't lose theirs. How is this to work on as an issue? It's exhausting. I mean, I haven't lost any kids, so I have, no right to, to complain. But, man, I mean, it's difficult to work in an issue where there's such trauma and such grief. But I just feel like having lived through Sandy Hook, feeling an obligation to those parents, I have no choice.
But that rot that you're concerned about in America's core, when Sandy Hook happened, America stopped. For a week, for more than a week, it stopped. And as horrible as yesterday was, what was most disturbing for me, America didn't stop. There's a lot of people who didn't hear about it. And that's just a week after the shooting in Buffalo, where not everybody is even buried yet. How concerned are you that we're becoming numb. We're accepting we're just broken. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very concerned about it, and you're right. I mean, this was the second worst school shooting in the history of the country, and yet it seemed like it was a bit business as usual yesterday. I mean, your network stopped, and other networks covered this extensively, but as I looked at my social media feeds, plenty of other things were still occupying a lot of people's attention. And I can only control so much here. And so I try to display my sense of outrage and hope that it channels something in other people. And I continue to spend a lot of time with the anti-gun violence movement because I do think that the stronger they get, the more likely we are to have legislation passed. But we're on the verge of just accepting this as the new normal in this country. And I don't know how the nation survives if we become this anesthetized to mass violence.
Is one of your challenges that not enough voters make gun safety their top issue? They care about it. They want something to change. But sadly, after a shooting happens, if it's not in one's community, people feel sympathetic, but then they go about their daily life and they're thinking about gas prices in school.
I mean, I think there are twin obligations here. One obligation is on leaders to do the right thing, but the other obligation is on voters to, kick out of office folks who over and over again vote against what 80%, 90% of Americans want. I mean, it is pretty remarkable that, people continue to get sent back to Congress and back to the United States Senate who don't support things like universal background checks. So, yes, I do think we need more voters to decide that this is going to be a litmus test issue for them. That happened in 2018. That was part of the reason why Democrats won control of the House. I'm going to give my Republican colleagues a chance to do the right thing here. So I'm not ready to put this to the voters because I want to give Republicans the chance to show voters that they are willing to step up. But the second obligation, Stephanie, is on Democrats. I mean, Democrats don't run on this issue in the way that we should. There are way too many Democrats that are scared, that think that there's some, political risk, that there's some political downside to talking about universal background checks. There isn't. There isn't. This is a political winner everywhere, in blue states, in red states, in purple states. So, Democrats need to campaign on this in 2022 because voters, often don't know the difference between the two candidates on guns because Democrats don't run ads on it. Democrats don't talk about this at the beginning of their speech. So we've got to lead on this if we want voters to make decisions based on positions that candidates have on this issue.
In order to make a difference, though, sir, do you not just need to defeat Republicans? Do you need to defeat the NRA? I want to pull up on the screen the top 10 senators who have taken the most money from the NRA over their careers. It's a whole lot of money, and it is very, very powerful Republicans. As long as the NRA has the stronghold it does your battle have any real hope?
Listen, I think we just have to disabuse my colleagues of the notion that the NRA matters. I mean, it just doesn't. They lose way more races than they win. Joe Manchin, Pat Toomey, took on the NRA. They wrote a background checks bill in 2013. They're still both in Congress. Pat Toomey didn't lose a primary from the right. Joe Manchin represents a very conservative district. He got reelected.
Senator,
so I just think we need to.
I have to interrupt then. If the NRA doesn't matter, how come an 18-year-old man bought 2 semi-automatic rifles on his 18th birthday and massacred a bunch of children yesterday?
No, listen, my point is this. I agree with you that the NRA does matter because it controls a big part of the Republican Party right now. But they have that control because there is a fear of the gun lobby's electoral power. And what I'm saying is that we have to explain to people that that power is largely illusory, that if you stand with the 90% of your constituents that believe in things like universal background checks, the gun lobby can't beat you In fact, you will win more supporters and more converts. That's how Pat Toomey is in Congress, representing a state that generally votes for Democrats. They vote for Pat Toomey because he supports universal background checks. That's what we have to convince folks of. But you are right. They hold a lot of power now, but they shouldn't hold as much power because their political abilities are more mythology than they are reality.
Senator, thank you so much for giving us all this time tonight. I know how busy you are right now. I appreciate it. Senator Chris Murphy, the state of Connecticut.
Thanks, Stephanie.